Hey everybody, welcome back to MACkiteboarding. Today I'm here with Ryan and we're going to come talk to you about a new wing in our shop we're pretty excited about, and that is the PPC M1 Wing. This is a fresh new wing to the market. It's using some unique materials which we're always stoked about, and after riding it a few times now, I figured to come to you guys with a review, tell you what that experience is like, what you like about it, what we maybe don't like about it, and bring you that info, because there's a lot of people with questions about this wing. It's sort of the hot topic on the market right now, I guess. Hooker, what were your thoughts on the M1?
Overall, I really liked that wing. It was a fast wing, like to go fast. I took it out, most of the time that I spent on it was on a really gusty day. It was like 15 to 28, and it handled the range awesome. Yeah. On the low end there, it was able to keep providing power as it kind of went through the middle of that range, and this was a 5 meter. It really accelerated and took off, and it was able to handle those huge gusts too. So overall, really enjoyed it. I thought it did pretty well surfing too. Flagged out really well. Yeah. Easy to handle, easy to switch hands with. The front handle on it was pretty awesome. On that day it was gusting, wind was pretty shifty, so I find myself holding on to that front handle, kind of like pistol gripping it quite a bit to have just a little more
that hard handle. It's got good grip on it. It's got kind of that angled, feature, so it gives you a nice handle on your pistol grip. So that's cool.
About the only negative thing I would say is the grip seemed a little big with gloves on.
Sure.
For my hands, it was just a little extra to hang on to, a little more forearm fatigue, but really riding it with a harness line, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say harness line, or it's usually a good idea with such a powerful wing too. It is super powerful, so it's definitely one of those ones that can be hard to hang on to with gloves if you're not used to that, or maybe if you're not riding a harness line for sure. But yeah, two things I realized: we're riding the 5 and the 4 predominantly. Number one, it's really fast, like you said. Really, top-notch, high-end speed riding. Great upwind, huge range, especially in the upper end of the range, and it seems like it just keeps wanting to build apparent wind. Like some wings seem like they sort of top out in that regard, and they still can ride higher, but they don't get that much faster. That one it was just blistering everywhere I rode it. The other thing I would say is it's incredibly stiff.
Yes.
So that comes back to the Dyneema airframe. Or if you're familiar with the words Cuban fiber from back in the day, that's kind of what they're using here, but it's a new version of that's different. That just makes it stiffer, more reliable, and they have some special techniques in manufacturing that allow them to use that material. A lot of what you'd do with a Lula or something like that with those special manufacturing techniques, but this stuff is crazy stiff, so stiff, and it's a unique material. It's almost like it almost seems like a laminated Mylar or something like that, where it's just totally watertight. Yeah. And when you pump it up really hard. It's a super small airframe. I mean, the thickness of the leading edge on the 5 is I don't know what you think, like that? It's like 8 or 9 inches. Yeah. So it's super sleek, super fast. You don't have all this extra material pulling through. It's just, you pump it up to 11, I think it is.
Yeah, 11 is what they say on there.
And that is just so rock solid with that material. It's like a rigid sail.
It is.
It doesn't flex at all. Yes. So one thing I would say on takeaway from that, super fast, super efficient. Every bit of power is going into creating lift, creating drive, creating that forward traction. But it is a wing that you feel.
Oh yeah.
Especially in those wild conditions like you're in, it's really up and down. You can really feel where that's at. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it just puts you in tune with what the wing is doing in the wind, what's the wind doing. With a lot of wings, especially if they're a little spongier, just really grunty, sometimes it's hard to tell exactly where upwind is. Yeah. Or what the perfect angle is that you can drive upwind if you're really going after it, trying to blister upwind as best as you can. The M1, you really feel it. I mean, it is such a direct response. You really feel every little bit bump, So it's kind of like driving a sports car. Yep. So it's not one of those wings, I wouldn't say, where you're gonna go out and just ride lit and just cruise one hand on it, leaning into your harness line. I guess you could do that, but if you're riding it properly powered, this wing really likes to ride with a lot of power. It's you know, maybe a physical wing to fly. It's definitely high performance.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means, you know, you sacrifice a little bit of comfort. I haven't really tried deflating it at all. I guess we could deflate it a little bit, get it down to like 9, 10 PSI. It's probably be a little bit, you know, a little bit more comfortable to fly if you're just going for a cruise. But in terms of performance, man, this wing is really phenomenal in those powered conditions, that high performance. If you're riding fast foils, if you're racing, if you just love ripping around, free riding quick, if you just want a wing that has a massive speed range, it's got a pretty decent low end, I would say. If you know how to pump it, you can definitely feel that sweet spot of where it likes to be held into the wind, where that, you know, spot is to pump it up and get it going in light wind. And, you know, it doesn't have a ton of ground where it's just going to lift you onto foil, you know, in light winds, but
it does build speed pretty well.
Yeah, it builds speed really well. Yeah, as long as you can get it moving and give it a couple of good pumps and do that, then you're off to the races. And once you're on foil, man, the thing takes off like a bat out of hell. It's just fast. Yeah. Creates so much apparent wind. As the first thing I realized, like, man, I got up and I was like, okay, I have a little bit of power. And then as soon as I started moving a little faster, it's just compounded, and it's like fast. I'm like, holy crap!
Yep.
Like it'll go there. It'll make you scared.
Yeah. I noticed that in those real strong gusty conditions with it is you hit that like kind of ideal wind range and you just keep taking off, and then all of a sudden the wind goes way up there and you're like, whoa, got to move it a little bit higher or let it out a little bit, because like you said, it gets scary fast.
It does. That's great. And you mentioned the surfability of it. It's just a nice, comfortable wing to surf with as well. So
flags
if you're crossing over into the waves like we are a lot of times, it flags out really well. It's super light. You know, maybe not as light as like a Lula, but definitely lighter than your traditional background construction, I would say.
Yeah,
flags out, you know, really well. I'd compare it to some of the best surf wings on the market in terms of how it flags out. So really happy there. It's always cool to have that racy performance alongside the surf performance, because it really covers a lot of territory in terms of riding style and, you know, days when you're out there optimizing your performance. So been pretty amped on that. Any complaints about the wing? Anything you don't really like?
Nothing really, other than what I mentioned with the handles, a little thicker than ideally like to ride with gloves, but not an issue too much with the harness line. And like you said, with it being really stiff and rigid, you start dragging wingtips with it. You got to be a little more cautious there, because it doesn't reflex and rebound quite the same as a Dacron wing would. But obviously just a few considerations to take into account when you're riding. Nothing that makes me want to ride anything else more than this. They just
yeah, totally. It's just one of those things you kind of get used to, or it's just like a quirky thing about it. For sure, it's so stiff that when you do drag a wingtip, you got to force it a little bit more. It's not just gonna fold and then reflex up. You know, it's gonna have to kind of drag through for a second. So it's a small wingtip, but you still need to pull it through the water if you touch it down. So just be a little bit more cognizant not to touch a wingtip down or whatever. But it's just a quirky thing, and I think a lot of people that are interested in this wing, it's kind of a non-issue. You know, they're not out there dragging wingtip every 5 minutes or anything like that. It's just when it does happen, it's like
you just got to lift it out of the water versus
got to manhandle it. In terms of pumping it up, if you're familiar with that, you know, it's just using a HP valve like you have on a SUP or F1 or Nash or a fly surfer. You know, they always use that kind of bayonet high pressure valve. So that's that. This is the M1 Wing. So we're gonna shoot this.
I gotta remember that PPC.
See out there, man.